Snow was falling like shredded lace, scattering across the stone-cold surface of Fifth Avenue in lazy spirals. The lights from the high-end storefronts glistened in the slush, and the city moved on, loud and indifferent. It was one of those New York nights that made the wealthy wrap their scarves tighter and the poor disappear deeper into alleyways. Julian Marks, heir to the Marks Tech fortune, stepped out of the black car with the slow grace of someone who had never once been told to hurry. His boots, handmade Italian leather, crunched on the salted sidewalk. He gave a half nod to the driver, who didn't expect thanks. Julian wasn't what people thought. Yes, he had a penthouse near Central Park. Yes, his father's company had just closed a deal worth more than most countries' GDP. But beneath the cold blue of his eyes was a quiet ache. One that no number of Rolexes or red carpet galas could stitch up. He turned the corner, heading toward a bakery known for its overpriced croissants. It was nearly closing, but he wasn't there for pastries. He was there for him. There, in the dim halo of the bakery's security light, sat the old man, blanket wrapped tight, eyes half shut, still as stone. He didn't ask for money. He never did. Didn't even keep a sign. Julian had first seen him 6 months ago. Same spot. Same silence. A statue in a sea of noise. At first, Julian did what everyone else did. Looked away. But the man just sat there without begging, which was, well, let's just say different. He just watched like he could see through suits and smiles. That quiet dignity haunted Julian. That night, months ago, Julian had handed him a warm sandwich and a cup of coffee. The man nodded once. Just once. It was more than gratitude. It was recognition. Since then, Julian had made it a ritual. Every Tuesday night, he brought something hot. He never asked the man's name. He didn't offer his own. Tonight was colder than usual, the kind of chill that sliced through cashmere. As Julian approached, he noticed the man was shivering, barely, but it was there. The frayed coat he wore couldn't stand up to this cold. Julian hesitated for a breath. Then, without a word, he shrugged off his own coat. It was a dark wool blend, custom fit from Milan. He knelt, yes, knelt, and wrapped it gently over the old man's shoulders. The man looked up, startled. His eyes were sharp, steel gray, alert. Not the dazed emptiness of addiction. There was pride there, even now. Julian saw it. "No one's ever done that," the old man said quietly, voice raspy like gravel underfoot. Julian smiled faintly. "It's just a coat." The man shook his head. "It's never just a coat, kid. Not when your bones remember what warmth feels like." Julian looked around. No one was watching. But somewhere, in the back of his mind, he could already hear his father's voice. "What the hell are you doing giving $1,000 coats to drunks?" That was how his family saw the world. Measured in assets and liabilities. Even kindness was transactional. Julian was the only one in his bloodline that still believed in giving something without asking what came back. He rose slowly. The old man's eyes followed him, but he said nothing more. That night at dinner, the backlash began. His father leaned over the marble table, glass of Bordeaux untouched. "You're making us look unstable." "Dad, I just gave someone a coat," Julian said simply. "You gave a homeless man a Cusinelli coat. There's a difference." His mother chimed in, pearl necklace glittering like a chain. "It's sweet, darling, but you need to think about perception." Julian's jaw tightened. "Do you ever wonder why they're even out there?" "Because they made poor choices," his father shot back. "And now you're rewarding them." Julian left the table that night, half a steak untouched, half a family conversation burned into memory. The next week, Julian returned to the same corner, a thermos in hand. The old man was there. "Thought you might have sobered up and realized I wasn't worth the wool," he said, eyes flickering with dry humor. Julian chuckled. "I don't drink. And you looked better in it anyway." The man accepted the thermos with a grunt. "You always this sentimental, rich boy? Only on Tuesdays." A pause, then a faint smile. The kind that cracked through weathered skin like sunrise through fog. Julian sat beside him for the first time. Just for a few minutes. They watched the traffic roll by, neon lights reflecting in puddles like stained glass lies. "You in the military?" Julian asked softly. The old man didn't answer at first. Then, "You see something in a man and can't unsee it, huh?" Julian shrugged. "It's the way you sit, like you're still ready for inspection." Another grunt. No denial. By December, the cold grew sharper, biting the bones of the city. Julian still came. Still brought food, still gave time. People noticed. A woman once stopped and whispered, "That your grandfather?" Julian only said, "That's a man." On Christmas Eve, Julian brought a small box wrapped in green ribbon. Inside was a fleece-lined winter coat and wool socks. Practical. Plain. The old man blinked slowly at the gift, then looked at Julian. "Why?" Julian's voice broke a little. "Because someone should." The man's eyes softened. For a second, Julian swore he saw something flash behind them, like a memory trying to break through. "Thank you, kid," he said. The coat remained. Through the brutal winds of January and the slush-slick sidewalks of February, Julian returned, like clockwork, to the corner of 5th and Lexington. And every time, without fail, the old man was there. Wrapped in the gift he once deemed too much, the man now wore the coat like armor. Not because it was expensive, but because it had been given freely. Without pity. Without fanfare. Let us know where you're watching us from. And if you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. You have nothing to lose, and it will mean the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video. Julian never asked for a name, and the man never gave one. So, somewhere between the third steaming thermos of soup and a night when the streetlights flickered like dying stars, Julian began calling him Colonel. The name stuck. "Evening, Colonel," Julian would say with a grin, offering food wrapped in foil and kindness wrapped in silence. "Back again, kid?" The colonel would reply, voice rough like old gravel roads. "I thought rich folk got bored easily." "I'm not most rich folk," Julian would answer. It became their ritual, as consistent as the cold. "What's your name, kid?" Colonel asked Julian one, completely out of the blue. "Julian," he replied. "Julian Marks." To which the colonel nodded, thoughtfully, and said nothing thereafter. Julian was sure the colonel would never have heard about his dad, seeing that he didn't even have a phone, not to mention being able to hear the news. Subsequently, they only spoke in fragments, brief exchanges about the weather, the state of the city, the quality of soup Julian brought that week. Julian never pushed. The colonel never elaborated. But sometimes there was a glimmer. Like the night it snowed harder than it had all winter. Julian had brought 2 slices of pepperoni pizza and a flask of hot tea. They sat side by side on the stoop of a darkened shop, watching snow bury the world inch by inch. The colonel looked up, his breath forming a ghost in the cold air. "I used to hate snow." Julian raised a brow. "Why?" The old man hesitated. "Afghanistan. Mountains. Cold in ways you don't expect. You think deserts are all heat." Julian blinked. It was the first real breadcrumb the man had dropped. Something tangible. "You served?" Julian asked gently. A long pause. Then the colonel chuckled dryly. "What gave it away? My charisma?" Julian smiled but said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence between them had always been more honest than the noise of the world. "That night," the colonel went on, almost absently. "Lost my whole unit once. Ambush. Some of them were just kids. Took years to stop waking up screaming. Then came home and lost something worse." Julian felt a knot form in his throat. The colonel didn't explain. He didn't have to. Julian didn't push. He simply handed him a fresh-knit scarf and said, "This should help tonight." The colonel held it in his hands for a moment, almost reverent. Then, "Thanks, kid. You show up like it means something." "It does." Word got around the shelter circuit. They called Julian the coat guy. Some mocked him, others admired him. A few tried to take advantage of his generosity, but he stayed focused. He wasn't trying to fix the world. Just show up for one man who reminded him that dignity wasn't tied to bank accounts. Back home, the tension simmered. His father had begun locking the family office after Julian donated several $1,000s to a local nonprofit for veterans. "You're throwing away your name, Julian," he snapped one evening. For what? A thank you from someone who won't remember your name. Julian had answered quietly. He doesn't have to remember my name. I just want him to remember he's not invisible. His father scoffed. This is madness. Julian almost agreed, because sometimes it did feel like madness. Walking the icy streets with hot soup while other men in his tax bracket were hosting rooftop galas. But Julian also knew madness was watching someone suffer and pretending it wasn't your business. Late February brought with it the first signs of spring, but also something darker. Julian arrived one evening and found the corner empty. No colonel, no blanket, no signs of life. For the first time in months, the city felt truly cold. Panicked, Julian asked a nearby vendor if he'd seen the old man. The vendor, a middle-aged guy with tired eyes, wiped his hands on a rag and said, "Yeah, him? Couple days ago, he collapsed. EMTs came. Took him to that midtown shelter, I think." Julian's chest clenched. He ran, not walked, to the shelter 3 blocks down. Inside, the smell of bleach and coffee lingered like regret. "I'm looking for an older man," he told the front desk volunteer. "Gray hair. Wears a black coat. Doesn't say much. Might have been brought in this week." The woman checked the chart. "No name. But we had someone like that. Admitted 3 days ago. Very quiet. Didn't want to be touched. We gave him a cot in the back." He Julian leaned in. "He what?" She swallowed. "He passed away this morning. In his sleep. Peacefully." Julian stood frozen outside the shelter. The wind didn't cut like before. It ached now. For months, he had known this man. Sat beside him. Broke bread with him. Called him Colonel out of jest and eventually out of reverence. And now he was gone. No last words. No final nod. Julian walked to the corner of 5th and Lexington that night anyway. Stood there alone, as if expecting him to materialize. He didn't. Instead, Julian knelt, right where the colonel once sat, and placed a folded note and a single white lily in the corner of the stoop. The note read simply, "Thank you for reminding me what real strength looks like. You mattered." 3 weeks had passed since the shelter. Since the empty corner on 5th and Lexington. Since Julian had knelt where the colonel once sat and whispered goodbye into the wind. He hadn't told anyone. Not his father, who would have dismissed the whole ordeal as a phase. Not his friends, who couldn't understand why someone like him would spend months feeding a stranger who could never repay him. Julian didn't need their approval. But the ache lingered, heavier than before. The city moved on. But he couldn't. Then came the envelope. It arrived on a Friday morning, tucked neatly among bills and invitations. Thick parchment. A Department of Defense seal embossed in gold. His name, Julian Tyler Marks, typed in sharp, formal font. Inside was a single sheet. "You are cordially invited to attend the interment of General Thaddeus A. MacArthur, Ret. At Arlington National Cemetery. Your presence has been requested by name. Please arrive at Gate 3, 0930 hours, March 18th. He read it again. Then again. "General Thaddeus MacArthur." Julian's heart thundered in his chest. His fingers trembled. The envelope slipped from his grip and landed on the kitchen counter like a verdict. The colonel wasn't just a veteran. He was a 3-star general. Julian arrived in Washington, D.C., 3 days later, dressed in a tailored black suit that felt suddenly too small. His tie wouldn't sit right. His mouth was dry. A young soldier met him at the entrance. "Mr. Marks." Julian nodded. The soldier snapped to attention. "This way, sir. We've been expecting you." They led him past rows of white headstones, precise, solemn, endless, and into the heart of Arlington. He'd seen it in movies, in history books. But standing among the graves, it felt sacred. The silence was not emptiness, it was respect. At the top of a gentle rise stood a ceremonial tent. A silver casket lay beneath it, draped in the American flag. Dozens of high-ranking officers stood in formation. Rows of soldiers in dress blues. An honor guard. A chaplain. And in the center seat, one marked with his name, was Julian. He sat down slowly, eyes fixed on the flag. The weight of it hit him. Not just the honor of being here, but the fact that no one else had come. No widow, no daughter, no blood relative, just Julian. The chaplain stepped forward, solemn and measured. General Thaddeus MacArthur served this nation with valor, sacrifice, and unshakable integrity. He led men into battle and brought them home when he could. He earned his stars with courage and bore his scars with silence. He paused, glancing at Julian. After his wife and 3 children were killed by a drunk driver, General MacArthur disappeared from the public eye. He refused interviews, declined pensions, evaded the press. For years, many assumed he was lost. The chaplain's voice broke slightly. But he wasn't lost. He was grieving. He lived in quiet, hidden corners of our cities. Until one young man, showed up, not to fix him, but to see him. Julian blinked back tears. Julian Tyler Marks, the chaplain continued. You gave General MacArthur dignity in his final days. You offered meals, warmth, and most importantly, presence. When his family was gone, you became the last person to see him. Not as a ghost, not as a statistic, but as a man. The honor guard stepped forward in unison. 8 soldiers flanked the casket, each movement precise, reverent. With military grace, the flag was folded, corner to corner, again and again, until it was a perfect triangle. A Marine major approached Julian with slow, deliberate steps. In her gloved hands, she carried the flag. She knelt before him. "Mr. Marks," she said softly, "on behalf of a grateful nation, and in memory of General MacArthur's service, I present this flag to you." He named you in his will as the final custodian of his memory. Julian reached out, his hands trembling as they closed around the flag. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Then came the sound. Boots. Dozens of them. He looked up and saw a line of generals, high-ranking officers, and fellow veterans forming a path from the gravesite. One by one, they approached. Each saluted him. Him. Not the grieving son of a millionaire. Not a young man trying to find meaning. But the last friend of a man who had once worn stars on his shoulders. The major stood again. He kept your name in a notebook he carried everywhere. Just 2 words. The kid. And beside it, loyal to the last. Julian clutched the flag tighter, tears now streaming freely down his cheeks. In that moment, surrounded by the nation's highest honors, Julian felt something he had never tasted at his father's banquets or behind velvet ropes. Belonging. He hadn't done it for this. He hadn't known this would ever come. But somehow everything made sense now. Every soup delivery. Every cold night. Every time he sat on the sidewalk when he could have turned away. After the ceremony, Julian remained seated as others departed in silence. The sun broke through the clouds, washing the white headstones in gold. The chaplain approached again, gently placing a small item beside him, a silver pin. It bore 3 stars. General MacArthur had one personal request, that this be given to you, along with a message. Julian looked up, startled. The chaplain smiled softly. He said, "Tell the kid that loyalty doesn't end at rank, and that sometimes the ones without medals give the greatest salutes." Julian stared down at the stars in his palm. He had found something wealth couldn't buy. Something legacy couldn't fake. Something real. The story broke quietly at first. A photo surfaced on a veteran's blog. Julian Marks, heir to the Tyler Marks fortune, kneeling beside a casket draped in the American flag, a folded triangle pressed to his chest. Behind him, a line of decorated generals stood in silent salute. Then came the questions. Why was the son of a billionaire at Arlington? Who was the man in the casket? The headlines hit the next day. Heir honored by military for quiet acts of kindness. The homeless general and the young man who saw him. Julian Marks, a different kind of hero. Julian didn't respond to interviews. His team issued no statements. His social media accounts went dark. For weeks, the tabloids swirled with rumors and half-truths. He vanished from the public eye after that. No charity galas. No red carpets. No appearances in glossy spreads. And just when the world forgot the story, something unusual happened. A small veteran food bank on the edge of downtown Washington, D.C., one that had been struggling to stay afloat, was suddenly renovated. New floors, industrial ovens, stocked shelves, volunteers in uniform. Its new name was carved into a polished wooden sign above the entrance. MacArthur's Table. No donor listed. No foundation credited. But those who knew knew. A framed photograph hung beside the front door. It showed General Thaddeus MacArthur in his uniform, eyes sharp with purpose. Below it, in smaller print, was a note. In honor of silent heroes. And those who remembered them. The donations kept coming. Anonymous, regular, and generous. Some said a man in a dark cap came by at dawn every month to restock the shelves or scrub the floor. He never said much, but the veterans always nodded at him like they knew. Back in New York, Julian returned once a month to a little bakery tucked into the corner of Delaney and Rose. It was there, almost 2 years ago, that he had first handed a hot muffin and coffee to a man on the sidewalk. The bench outside remained the same, worn wood, paint chipped from years of sun and rain. Except now, a brass plaque had been fixed to the backrest. It read, "In honor of those we overlook." Jam. Every Saturday morning, without fail, someone left a paper cup of coffee and a pastry on that bench. Sometimes with a napkin folded neatly beneath it. Sometimes with a note. No one ever took credit, but everyone understood. Julian's family changed too, slowly, awkwardly. His mother cried when she read the letter General MacArthur had left behind, naming Julian, the last man who looked me in the eye and saw more than a ruin. His younger sister, Davida, began volunteering at a veteran center near her university. Even Davis Marks eventually stood in front of the bench, staring at the plaque in silence. He didn't say much that day. Only a quiet, gravel-throated, "I didn't know the man was a general." Julian replied without looking at him. He didn't want you to know. He just wanted to be seen. They never spoke of it again. A year passed. One morning, as the sun poured over Arlington's rows of white, a school group wandered past MacArthur's headstone. The teacher paused. "Anyone know who General MacArthur was?" A boy raised his hand. "My dad said he was a hero who disappeared, but someone remembered him. Some rich guy who didn't treat him like trash." The teacher smiled. "That's right. Sometimes the richest gift you can give isn't money." Somewhere far from the cameras, Julian sat on that old bakery bench, sipping coffee from a plain white cup. The city bustled around him, cars, dogs, laughter, but he was still, grounded. In his lap sat a copy of a letter he now carried with him always. General Thaddeus A. MacArthur's final words to the Department of Defense. "If the boy ever wonders why I named him, tell him this. I wore stars on my shoulders, but he carried the greater weight. He saw what no one else did, and he stayed." Julian folded the letter back into its envelope. He didn't need applause. He didn't need the world to remember his name, because someone had remembered his friends. He gave more than money. He gave time. And in return, he received something even the richest man could never buy, America's salute. Would you have stopped for him? What would you do if greatness sat under your awning? Comment below, like this video, and subscribe for more real, emotional stories that remind us of the quiet heroes among us.